salvo of StAnza 2013. On behalf of my staff colleagues, StAnza trustees and our Festival Planning Committee, I'm delighted to welcome you to the festival launch this year, our 16th annual festival. First of all, I'd like to make thanks to the musicians from St Leonard's School. I'm not quite sure if they've all disappeared, but if there are any of them here, thank you to them for entertaining us earlier this evening. And also to the Poetry Theatre students who have been going around offering you a first little taste of poetry this year. They will be back at various times during the festival around our hub this year in the supper room. This year I am particularly delighted, as well as hugely relieved, to have reached the point of opening the festival. I won't deny that at some points over the last almost 6 weeks, often at 4 o'clock in the morning, this has seemed an impossibly ambitious goal. And yet, here we are, in this wonderful medical and biological science building. And my thanks to the university and to this department for allowing us to fill this space with poetry and music this evening. Most of you will know that we were blown off course at the end of January by the Byre Theatre closure. StAnza is in fact older than the Byre's present manifestation in its building, but for many years it has been our wonderful hub venue, and its loss this year was a definite blow. It almost knocked me sideways, except that as soon as the news broke, I started to get emails and phone calls from around town, from people offering to help. Visit Scotland offering to sell tickets. The university, the schools, the churches, shops and other businesses and organisations offering venues, other festivals. Quite wonderfully, the Byre Theatre staff themselves, who of course were the first victims of the Byre closure, all wanting to help StAnza weather the storm and rise to the challenge of first of all working out new box office arrangements, new venues for more than half of more than 100 events, and also a way to get the news out about this to all our audiences. And this was not just from St Andrews, although it was very, very significant in St Andrews, but from across Fife, Scotland, and much further, the messages of goodwill from poets and festival regulars, and the offers of help which poured in were amazing, often even overwhelming, sometimes humbling. And it became clear not only that StAnza 2013 could go ahead, but that riding on the crest of this, it was going to be a very special festival indeed. This year's programme is going ahead almost entirely as per the brochure, with its wonderful cover image by Lucilla Sim, last year's artist in residence, except, of course, for the venue changes. The only one absolute casualty was the Harbour exhibition, which we've had to postpone to another year. And we have a new flyer poster listing all the replacement venues, so do be sure to pick up a copy of that before you leave this evening. We have a truly wonderful lineup this year. I'm especially pleased to have a number of poets on the programme who've been invited several times and who were finally able to accept this year. They too have all been amazingly supportive and understanding about the last-minute changes and beyond-the-box thinking necessary in challenging circumstances. So my thanks to them also for this. It's a packed programme. As well as so many readings and performances, we've got lots of music, visual art, drama, talks and conversations, participation events, and many little quirky extras. We have poems lettered on windows around town, audio poems via smartphones, poems even on dresses which will speak to you, poems on cakes, a poet on a bike for the weekend. We even have a recycling bin of abandoned draft poems looking for a new owner. And poetry on small bookshelves around town to browse, borrow or keep. A special welcome to the poets, artists and guests who have joined us already from Singapore, Canada, Australia, Iceland, Ireland, the Netherlands, Germany, Finland, Sweden, Latvia and from across the UK. As ever, I have to thank all those who have made this festival possible. Everyone on the back of the brochure, I hope you've all got a brochure, and individuals who've made donations to us over the last year, for all their contributions, great or small, in cash or in kind. All welcome, all essential. Starting with our funders, Creative Scotland, Event Scotland and Fife Council. The overseas arts agencies, especially this year Culture Ireland and Canada Council for the Arts. Supporters such as the Russell Trust, St Leonard's School and Madras Academy, and of course St Andrews University, currently, as the poster says, celebrating their 600th anniversary. And the School of English there, who are supportive of us in multiple ways. And we value also the support of hotels and businesses around town, especially Greyfriars, the Albany and Fairmount St Andrews, and Stay in St Andrews, who've worked with us this year. Stewart's the Baker from further away, Fisher and Donaldson, and the many others locally who work with us to deliver this festival. Every year, StAnza works around two themes, which I hope give each festival a distinct identity and a fresh flavour. Our themes for this year are legacy and place, and designs on poetry. Both themes come together in two of the workshops and in various other events and installations. For the Year of Natural Scotland, we also have a focus on poetry and the environment, and on Welsh poetry. As the cream of Welsh rugby talent travels to meet Scotland at Murrayfield this week, we have a whole range of Welsh poetic talent meeting Scotland here on the field of poetry, headed up by the national poet of Wales herself, Gillian Clarke. And as ever, it's a huge pleasure and satisfaction to work with our many partners, such as Fife Contemporary Art and Craft, the Scottish Poetry Library, the Barnes Graham Trust, the Preservation Trust, the Public Library, Fraser East, and new for this year, Speaking Volumes, Literature Across Frontiers, IMRAM, Grey Hen Press, and even the Pan-African Badilisha Poetry Exchange. We have this year, over the 5 days of the festival, more than 100 events, exhibitions and installations. Usually in the Byre, I would be pointing out some of these exhibitions. I can't do that this year, except we have one I'm going to mention later. But what would have been in the Byre are all now in the Town Hall. And the others, per the brochure, are exactly where they are said they would be. From out of town Fairmont St Andrews and to various places around town, the Preservation Trust, the town library, and as I say, we have installations in various businesses around town. So be sure to check them out and not to miss them. But of course, to launch the festival, we need some poetry. And I'm delighted that we have 3 of this year's poets who are each going to read us a poem and to give us a taster of what is to come. So first of all, I would like to introduce Gillian Clarke. Gillian was last here, I think it was in 2004, and her reading then in All Saints is one of my all-time StAnza highlights. Nowadays, she is of course the National Poet of Wales. This year's focus on Welsh poetry is something I've had in mind for a number of years, and it's a huge pleasure to welcome Gillian back to StAnza as part of this. So please welcome Gillian Clarke.
Noswaith da. Good evening. In the Middle Ages, you all would have spoken that language here in County of Fife, because Welsh, in fact, was British, Brythoneg, and we are one people. It's lovely to be here because I feel I'm coming to one of my homes in the British Isles. And I'd like to say, and it's a much harder word this, llongyfarchiadau to Eleanor for rescuing the festival, and to all of the lovely people of this place who supported you, because what could be better, what could be more important in the world? Think of what horrors are going on out there in Westminster, for example, compared with the civilised behaviour in this town. I'm so happy to be here. So, diolch yn fawr iawn, thank you very much indeed for inviting me. I thought I'd read something I like reading first, it's sort of fun. Just one poem. Because I'll be talking a lot about the relationship between us, the Welsh, and the Scot tomorrow, but I just thought I'd hint at it now. One of the great things that Caroline Duffy, the Poet Laureate, has done is got the Guardian on side and produced all those wonderful pages of poetry, big spread of poetry across the middle of the Guardian so very often. And when she wanted to do a book for called Jubilee Lines, nice title, for the Queen's Jubilee, she decided to ask 60 poets to write a poem about one particular year. And we weren't allowed to argue. She gave me 1955. Danny Apsey got 1953. Fleur Adcock got 1954. I got 1955. Don't argue. But it was great because when I thought about it, it was my last year as a schoolgirl. So I had, you know how enormously powerful your adolescence is in your poetry grown-upness. I mean, early childhood and then I think adolescence are really, really powerful forces, emotional forces for every writer, for every person. And I just remembered one particular day at my school. I just want to tell you that there was no such thing as a teenager. The word teenager let all sorts of people off all of the difficulties that we caused difficulties, but we were just schoolgirls behaving badly. We were not teenagers. Teenagers, once that was invented, you could do an awful lot of naughty things to be understood. Nobody understood anything that we wanted or did. And I can just remember that enormous force of longing to go out in the world and meet a gorgeous guy. All I thought about was boys. And there weren't any. Because I was in a convent boarding school. I was utterly convinced that by the time I got out of it, all of them would have been gone. That all of the pretty girls would have grabbed them all, and there would not be one left for me. So one day, my school was on the south coast of Wales in Porthcawl, and there were sand dunes between the building and the sea. I just don't know who this was, but one of my friends and I suddenly began to run. And we ran, and we ran, and we ran, down the dusty road, through the sand dunes, on a hot, hot summer day, to the sea. Out of sheer hormonal frustration. Running away to the sea, 1955. It might have been heat stroke, the unfocused flame of desire for a name in a book, a face on the screen, the anonymous object of love. Two schoolgirls running like wildfire, banking off through dunes to the sea, breathless. We were lost and free, east of Eden. It was James Dean, Elvis, Bill Haley and the Comets. It was Heartbreak Hotel on the gramophone. It was Heathcliff by torchlight, in bed after lights out. The dunes were molten glass. We slowed to a dawdle, rippling sand with our toes, grains of gold through our fingers, on our skin and our hair, without words to say why, or who, or where. This, I remember. The hour was still. Bees browsing sea lavender. And beyond the dunes, the channel as blue as the Gulf of Araby. A name from the drowse of a daydreaming lesson. Sun on the board, the chalk, sister's hand, a faraway voice as if heard through water, murmuring rosaries. Egypt, the Red Sea, the Bitter Lakes, Suez, a psalm of biblical names called geography. That was the last day the world stood still. In a year, there'd be tanks in Budapest, over Sinai, bombers on the move, and I'd be in the streets in the march against war as empires loosened their grip. It was almost like love.
Thank you, Gillian. If Gillian is an old friend to StAnza, Alvin Pang from Singapore is a very new one. He and I first met last summer when we shared a stage for a panel event at the South Bank Centre in London. I had the pleasure of hearing him read the following day in an event in a small basement room there, so crowded and hot that only the poetry kept everyone from passing out. As soon as I heard him read his first poem, I knew I wanted him to come to StAnza. So please give a very warm welcome to Alvin Pang.
Thank you very much, Eleanor, for having me here, and thank you everyone for having me here in St Andrews. Been to the UK many times. It's my first time in St Andrews, and I'm loving it, even the cold. There is supposed to be an Arabic saying or proverb that says the soul travels at the speed of a camel. I don't know if it's one of those proverbs that really comes from the Middle East or is made up and gets circulated on the internet. But having come a fairly long way, 14 hours flight, it sort of does feel a little bit like I've left half my soul behind. I'm hoping it will catch up with me in time for my reading on Saturday, or was it Friday? On Sunday, sometime like that. So I'll just share one short-ish poem. It will not be 4 minutes. And it's about, appropriately enough, long-haul flights. It's called In Transit, and I wrote it after reading on a plane, as one does, a collection of poetry by the Filipino poet Mane Kilatis. And in one of his poems about air travel, he had these lovely lines: between our arrivals and our departures, it is a strangely guiltless territory. So, and my poems in transit. With my wife in her usual high-altitude slump, seatbelt fastened, the cabin lights dimmed, and bad comedy on the movie channel, I slip into what one poet has termed the blameless country of air travel. I've plowed through several novels this way, unperturbed, felt the heart surge when a particularly rousing phrase of Beethoven's coincides with the exact moment of takeoff. And sometimes this peace is so rare, I wave off the free champagne. And in economy, the meals are never worth missing the view for sunset over the Grand Canyon, or the Pacific flowing like silk brocade. And now we enter the sphere of maps, a world abstracted and solid all at once, as settlements snuggle up to rivers and paddy fields play endless checkers on terraced hillsides. There's space enough for long thoughts and wispy musings. Do clouds, for instance, discharge their burdens in relief? Or do they, in their secret hearts, dream of their fallen? And which is the life we regret, the one we leave behind, or the one to which we hurl at 800 kilometers an hour? Because only at such giddy velocities might we savor the wonder of stasis, how the Earth's rotation holds us easily in place, just as if we knew the true evanescence of a second, it would stop us in our tracks, with indecision if not physics. So yes, even in seat 34A, risking thrombosis, with barely enough room to clap, there's time enough to ponder unseen forces, the invisible lift beneath all our wings, and only the first human century with this luxury of boredom. If the flight were any longer, we would resort to art, plot new routes to godhood. No wonder the pyramids had tombs built like departure lounges, since many of us too would opt to go to ground this way with such conducted ease to the sound of our preferred music in the company of strangers. How good to set off so eager, yet unhurried, and to arrive watchful and welcomed at the gates. Thank you for your work.
So now you know why I wanted Alvin to make that 14-hour journey. We've had a very long and rewarding relationship with the university and several schools at the university, especially the School of English. And it's particularly satisfying this year to have been working with the School of Computer Science and Al Dell there and his team on what we hope is a long-term project which we are launching here tonight, our digital poetry trail of St Andrews. St Andrews has long been known as Scotland's poetry town, in part because of the School of English and also StAnza, but also because of the long and distinguished list of poets who have worked, lived or studied in the town since the Middle Ages. Using the latest technology and a School of Computer Science spin-off called Crackerbox, spelt with Q's, we're setting up a virtual and actual poetry trail around town, which we hope will eventually have information about and links to poems by every one of these past and present poets who have lived, worked or studied in St Andrews. And this list will expand, of course, year by year as their number grows. I first had the idea when I heard a presentation in Berlin several years ago about digital media. I mentioned it to Robert Crawford, who it turned out had been thinking along the same lines, and he introduced me to Al Derrell. And now, nearly 2 years later, result. So thanks to Robert for that, and also to Lewis Crawford and Paula Wiscombe, who both worked on this project to bring it to this stage. If you go to the Crackerbox website, that's www.crackerbox.com, you can see the start of what will eventually, we hope, be a very long list. So far, there are about a dozen poets initially put on reading poems attached to places around town. You can see the pages that are shown on the website on the monitor, and thanks to the IT folk upstairs here at the MBSB who kindly set this up for me. Click on the audio links on the website and you hear the poets read poems, and if you have a smartphone you can wander around town following the map on a handout we'll be giving out, or looking at the map on the website, and you can click on QR codes which have today appeared all over town, and you can listen directly to the poets reading the poems in situ at these locations. There are about 10 or 12 already up, and more will follow over the rest of the year. If you live locally, you can watch them go up and go out and taste each new one. But if you come here from a distance, then you can follow the progress online. And then when you come back next year, you can do the expanded trip then. So we're delighted by this, and do pick up one of the flyers we'll have at the town hall so that you can see the map and follow the trail. How to follow science from the university, but with music from the university. I'm delighted this evening that we have one of the leading musical performances from the festival, from the University of St Andrews Buchanan Scholarship Quartet, who have come to play for us this evening. So please give them a very warm welcome.
Thank you.
14 hours for. Erin Moure is a Canadian poet and translator of distinction. She has published more than 17 books of poetry, 12 books of translations. I heard Erin read in Berlin in about 2007 or 2008, and I've been inviting her to StAnza pretty much every year since. She's been trying to make it fit her schedule, so it's a huge pleasure that this year she has managed. Thanks to Canada Council for the Arts, who are supporting travel for all our Canadian poets. And please welcome her as this year's Poet in Residence, Erin Moure.
Thanks, Eleanor, and thanks, everybody. I'm really super pleased to be at StAnza this year, finally. I've been here for several years in a row now in my dreams. And it's great to be here actually in person. It's such an incredible year too, where the whole team of people who organize StAnza and all the people in St. Andrews have come together to make to reorganize the festival. It's been organized twice this year, which is pretty amazing. I'm going to read 3 short texts. I don't have any poems in my most recent work that go on for 4 minutes. So I'm just going to read you 3 little texts out of The Unmentionable. I do not think that, nevertheless I think that. I have tried to pass. I have always attempted to look. I was taken one day. I found myself surrounded. It is from this idea that I have even understood. I have never sufficiently developed. I have tried to define it otherwise. I substitute for comprehension. I might be entirely I, more I than I myself. If in a certain moment the I arises, I am not interested. I still remain I. I do not know if you may speak of hope. In the infinity of this you, the I arises, against which death can do nothing. Everywhere, everyone comes from somewhere, Mom. No, Donieczko, not everyone. Some people come from nowhere. But you came from a passport, Mati, long before. You came from somewhere. When there was no one left, it became nowhere. There were no more letters after the... When they find the child up in the hill and bring her home, frightened of bears. We have hidden with 2 girls on burning hidden sheet metal. Roof has been fire lit, and it burned fastly despite big snow. There, child further saved being burning. One of they have hung on gate with nails young boy, and they have deadened him within his shirt. When my mother has said my child suffocate, experience is not what was undergone, but later me saying it. Chair fall down. It is right, Evelini, to trace this. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. I should tell you that Erin's main reading is on Friday evening in the Town Hall. Alvin's main reading is on Saturday night in the Town Hall, and Gillian's main reading is tomorrow night in the Town Hall, but they're all doing other things as well. So I'm sure you'll want to catch them at one or other of these. When the news about the buyer broke, a local poet made the comment to me that, after all, poetry is about the voice, not the venue. It seems really fitting that long before this, I'd invited to launch this year's festival the award-winning broadcaster, journalist and commentator, who for many people, through her radio work, has become the Scottish voice of intelligent, passionate, yet reasoned debate on matters pertaining to Scotland and the wider world. So to launch StAnza 2013, please join me in welcoming this year's very special guest, Lesley Riddoch.
Well, no pressure then. Thank you very, very much indeed for that introduction, Eleanor. And I mean, I was absolutely delighted and honoured to be asked along. How many folk here are from Fife? Let's try that again with your hands up, proud. Fifers! Right, great. That's good. That's nearly about half the room. And I'm here in St Andrews as well. By God. How many folk from St Andrews? No. But how interesting. There's actually more Fifers tonight in St Andrews than St Andrews folk. And that this is part of the theme of tonight, is about the connection between people, place, legacy. And actually we've been having some fascinating discussions already on this table about that. Before I say something about that, can I make a wee plea actually for the very place we're in? I know there's been this irritating kind of vent thing going off there that some of you might have heard. And I was looking at this building because some of you right on cue. Some of you might not be as familiar, like myself. I had to look to see where this was tonight to make sure I could find it. And when I was looking at it, I just looked at the building a wee bit, because this is actually a very special building. This is apparently one of the first medical schools in Britain which integrates research across all the sciences, that is, biology, physics, chemists, physics and astronomy are all linked within this building here. So that's kind of moderately interesting, but this is almost poetic. It's an eco-building. We kind of are familiar with that these days. It has solar panels on the roof. It has quite a number of other things. It has recycled materials, but wait for this. It has toilets flushed with rainwater. Isn't that beautiful? I'm sure, Gillian, you could do something with that, couldn't you? Yeah, she's busy getting tucked into an egg sandwich, but when she recovers, toilets flushed with rainwater. So, I mean, every building has its quirks, every place has its thing. And that is, from the minutiae of things like this, to the larger concepts of what it is to be in our nation and to discuss place. These are all the things that poetry does many times better than anything else. Enjoying the thing. These are hums, these are noises, this is part of our world, it's part of our world tonight. And so many times in broadcasting, we seek to try and quieten everything down. It's got to be a controlled environment. It has to be empty. It has to focus you just on one person's voice. Life's not like that. And thank God for it. It's not like that. It's like this. It's like all these things that happen, as John Lennon said, life's getting on, is doing its thing in very many directions other than the one that you planned. Now, tonight we were sitting discussing here the Welsh connection, of course. It made me remember that I interviewed Geoffrey Howe once. He was coming here in the year when Scotland managed to vote out every single Conservative MP. I don't know if any of you were around then. But I mean, actually, an extraordinary feat, really, when you think about it, because that's not easy through first past the post. That is like, thank you, friend. That is like, trying to do a really difficult thing. Yep, we're now getting the full panoply of all the quirks of the room. That is trying to do a very difficult thing, and on that occasion it was done. So he was a wee bit defensive, perhaps, and he expected me to be a difficult interviewer, and he was right. So he came in immediately with a deflectionary observation. Riddoch, he said, Riddoch, do you realise your name is Welsh? He said, it's Riddoch, and you should get with your history. So, of course, I didn't perhaps as thoroughly as I expected. I've been having a little bit of an education tonight. And what was happening as we were talking here is a lovely aspect of this thing about legacy and place that I think there'll be lots of during the days that are to come. Because we started off talking about, as Gillian will do a lot more, about the legacy of Welsh right here in St Andrews and in Scotland. And in fact, Glasgow, I'm told now, is of Welsh origin. So Glasgow was going backwards and forwards across the table
it's ours, it's Gaelic. No, it's Welsh originally. Backwards and forwards it went. And it made me think my own links are actually with Caithness, which is where my mother comes from. And they recently had, as you may know, the Gaelic mod. You may also know the Caithnesians like to think they're Norwegian and don't really feel much affinity with Scotland, and certainly not any with the Gaels, which is a short-sighted way of looking at life. And since the mod was coming, a little inhospitable. So we had a debate. We got everybody in to try and square this thing away before the mod came. We had a fascinating night with Nancy Nicholson, who's a poet, right at the centre of it. Again, it's poets who are, if you like, the custodians of connection. And what we discovered was one word, and I'll leave you with it because it's an interesting idea about how these things connect us much more powerfully, perhaps than any others. It's the word for cod. Now, when I was young and I had a bit of a hangdog expression, which happened, like kind of, my mother would call me a trosk. I didn't quite know where that came from. She was from Caithness. But the word, have we got any Gaels in the house? Gaels, over there.
Irish Gael. We also say trosk for cod.
Thank you. Have we got any Norwegians in the house? Because I understand, well, I know the Norwegian for cod is also torsk. And I think in Scottish Gaelic, it's also torsk. So, you know, here's Caithness trying to deny that it's sitting in the middle of this fabulous maelstrom. All these influences that have washed over that country as surely as the wind and the rain. The words connecting all of us with that fabulous expression. You know, only a wicker would be able to look at that sort of hangdog, you know, expression and see a cod staring back. But then that idea links all the places that have ever had to depend on fish. So, you know, I think it's fabulous the sort of connections we have, and this is what it should be. It should be ideas, names, backgrounds, places, going backwards and forwards across the table, trying to see the links. It doesn't matter the way who was there first, but it's so interesting. It pieces together the fragments of your identity, your awareness of language. These are all the things that cause delight. And this is what you were talking about earlier, the lack of delight in much of our lives at the moment, thanks to things out with our control. And it's important to keep this all back in. There was a poet who died yesterday in Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, and I was reading as well, just to finish, some thoughts of his. Here's how his psychiatrist described him. He said he was a hyperkinetic and imprudent man, unpunctual, someone who overreacts to criticism, harbours grudges, is politically astute, possesses tremendous stamina, and never sleeps for more than 2 hours a night. Now, if that's not a poet, I don't know what it is, actually. And I say that as one who was married to one, so I've done my time. Here is one of his poems, and you know, you start reading it and you think, this is a little bit facile, wait till you get to the end. You may know, of course, he was in endless battle with the Americans, so this is really dedicated to George W. Bush. W vowed that I was daffy to have dallied with Gaddafi, so my eyes in shame and sorrow cast I to my palace floor. What's with that insane Iraqi? Don't you think that's big-time wacky? Palling with a guy with whom I'm soon to go to war? Quoth the princeling, ever war. How fabulously contemptuous, isn't it? Just wonderful. And here's another one he wrote. Wealthy birth instills contempt in the appointed for elected peasants. So, you know, fabulous thoughts really that kind of colour life very vividly. And it's no wonder, for those of us who didn't know much about the man, that he is already so missed. We can see, we can feel how important he was to his people. And it wasn't just this transformation of their country using oil into something resembling a socialist state. It was because he managed to portray and connect so powerfully with people with incredibly evocative language when he chose. So I'm delighted to kind of cast the net into 2013
I'm tremendously impressed with everything Eleanor and the team have done, as you all know, and delighted as well to be in this new eccentric, breathing, belching and everything else building in the middle of posh St Andrews, in the middle of Fife, in the middle of a year about natural Scotland, this beautiful place, in the middle of the hospitality we can offer our guests, in the middle of poetry. Thank you very much, and here goes the year.
Thank you, Lesley. We have a Norwegian poet arriving tomorrow, so somebody must remember to ask him what the Norwegian for cod is. It only remains for me, first of all, to thank all those who've taken part in this launch event. Lesley, of course, who has been our special guest. To the poets, Gillian Clarke, Alvin Pang and Erin Moure. To the music provided by the wonderful St Andrews Buchanan Scholarship Quartet. This is just the very first taste of all that's in store over the next 5 days. I do hope you have taken away with you tonight a brochure and a list of the changed venues. Our festival hub this year will be at the supper room in the town hall, which, as far as we can possibly make it, and we have tried extremely hard, will offer the same kind of welcoming, bustling hub that the Buyer has done so wonderfully for the past years. However, this evening is not over. This evening is really just starting, because we move on from this to the festival opening performance, which comes to us from Dublin. Very shortly, we're running I think about 10 minutes late, so we'll just give people time to pick up their tickets. And then in the theatre, which is just over here, we will have River Run. I hope many of you are going to stay for that. And if not, that we'll see you back for many of the events coming over the next 5 days. And thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank you.